The space around Kepler 442 was quiet. Too quiet for Admiral Vextar Zeal's liking. He stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the viewing screen with growing interest. 5 small ships floated in the distance. They looked harmless enough. Commander Kurth, what do our sensors tell us about these vessels? Admiral Zul asked his second-in-command. Commander Kurth Newell looked at his datapad and frowned. They appear to be exploration ships, Admiral. Basic. Shields, simple weapons, chemical propulsion systems. Nothing that should concern our fleet. Admiral Zal smiled, showing his sharp teeth. The Zarathian Empire had conquered 12 different species across 3 star systems. These humans would make number 13. How many ships do they have? 5. Ships total, sir. Our fleet has 27 warships. The odds are clearly in our favor. The Admiral nodded. This would be easy. Too easy, perhaps, but the Empire needed new territories and new slaves. These humans had chosen the wrong system to explore. Open a communication channel to their lead ship, Admiral Zeal ordered. On the human ship Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair. He was a calm man with graying hair and steady eyes. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. The bridge looked simple and clean, nothing like the powerful warships of Earth's true fleet. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the alien flagship, said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park, the ship's tactical officer. She was young but smart, with dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Put it on screen, Lisa, Captain Morrison sighed. The viewing screen flickered, and a large alien face appeared. Admiral Zal had blue-gray skin, yellow eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He wore a military uniform covered in medals and decorations. I am Admiral Vextar Zal of the Zarathian Galactic Empire, the alien said through the universal translator. His voice was deep and threatening. You have entered Imperial space without permission. This is a crime punishable by death or slavery. Captain Morrison remained calm. He had expected this. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Liberty. We are on a peaceful exploration mission. We mean no harm to your empire. Admiral Zal laughed, a harsh sound that made the bridge crew uncomfortable. Peaceful? How amusing. Your species is unknown to us, which means you are weak and primitive. I will give you one chance to surrender. What are your terms? Captain Morrison asked, though he already knew what the answer would be. Complete surrender of all 5 ships and their crews. You will turn over all your technology and knowledge to the Empire. Your people will serve as workers in our factories and mines. Those who resist will be executed. Captain Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew showed no fear, only quiet confidence. They had trained for this moment for years. That's quite an offer, Admiral, Captain Morrison said politely. However, I'll need to discuss this with my fellow captains before giving you an answer. Admiral Zal's eyes narrowed. You dare to negotiate with the Zarathian Empire? Very well. You have 30 minutes to decide. After that, we will destroy your ships and take what we want from the wreckage. The transmission ended, and the alien face disappeared from the screen. Well, that went about as expected, said Chief Engineer Paul Henderson from his station. He was a stocky man with kind eyes and steady hands. Should I begin charging thee? Real weapon systems? Not yet, Paul, Captain Morrison said. Let's stick to the plan. Lisa, open a secure channel to the other captains. 4 faces appeared on smaller screens around the bridge. Captain Ben Hayes of the Constitution looked serious and ready. Captain Amy Foster of the Yorktown seemed relaxed, almost bored. Captain Ryan Cooper of the Intrepid was checking something on his tablet. Captain Nina Torres of the Defiance was smiling slightly. Everyone heard that conversation, I assume? Captain Morrison asked. Hard to miss, Captain Hayes replied. Standard Empire behavior. Demand surrender, threaten destruction, claim everything for themselves. The question is, are we ready to drop the act? Captain Foster asked. My crew is getting tired of pretending to be helpless scientists. Captain Morrison nodded. Our long-range sensors show they have exactly the fleet composition we expected. 27 ships, all using standard Zarathian technology. Nothing we haven't seen before. My engineering team has been monitoring their communications, Captain Cooper added. They're using basic encryption. We've been reading their messages for the past hour. Captain Torres leaned forward. They're planning to disable our engines first, then board our ships. Very predictable. Any signs they suspect what we really are? Captain Morrison asked. None at all, Captain Hayes said. Their sensors are showing them exactly what we want them to see. 5 harmless exploration ships with basic defenses. Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh, the Liberty's weapons officer, looked up from his station. Captain, the fake weapon signatures are holding steady. They think our main guns are simple plasma cannons. Good work, Steve, Captain Morrison said. How much time do we have left on their deadline? 22 minutes, sir, Communications Officer Lieutenant Susan Clark replied. She was monitoring all the alien communications channels. Plenty of time, Captain Morrison said. Are all ships ready for the reveal? Each captain nodded in turn. They had practiced this scenario dozens of times in simulations. The first contact with an aggressive alien empire was always dangerous, but humanity had prepared well. Remember, everyone, Captain Morrison said seriously, we're not here to start a war. We're here to prevent one. These Zarathians need to understand humanity is not easy prey. What if they don't listen? Captain Torres asked. Then we'll have to be more convincing, Captain Morrison replied. But let's hope it doesn't come. To that double quotes Dr. Helen Martinez, the fleet's diplomatic advisor, spoke up from her station. Captain, I've been studying their body language and speech patterns. This Admiral Zal is typical of Zarathian military leaders. Aggressive, proud, but not stupid. If we show him the truth about our capabilities, he might be reasonable. That's what we're counting on, Helen, Captain Morrison said. All right, everyone, take your positions. In 20 minutes, the Zarathian Empire is going to learn something new about humanity. The 5 ships floated quietly in space, looking harmless and defenseless, but appearances could be deceiving. Very deceiving indeed. The secure communication channel between the 5 human ships buzzed with quiet activity. Captain Morrison looked at the faces of his fellow captains on the smaller screens. Each one commanded a ship that looked like a simple exploration vessel. From the outside, the truth was very different. Status report from each ship, Captain Morrison said calmly. Ben, how's the Constitution? Captain Ben Hayes checked his displays. All systems green, Jake. The fake sensor readings are working perfectly. They think we have basic deflector shields and maybe a few small plasma guns. Amy, what about Yorktown? Morrison asked. Captain Amy Foster smiled. My crew loves this game of pretend. The aliens have no idea we're carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. The nanite warheads are ready for deployment. Captain Ryan Cooper of the Intrepid looked up from his tablet. The gravity manipulation systems are online and ready. I can create space-time distortions on command. The Zarathians have never seen anything like it. Captain Nina Torres of the Defiance stretched in her command chair. The temporal displacement. Field is charged and stable. We can phase out of normal space-time whenever needed. Their sensors won't even know where we went. Captain Morrison nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Paul, what's the status of our stealth systems? Chief Engineer. Paul Anderson looked up from his console. The holographic projectors are working perfectly, Captain. To their sensors, we look like we have old-style chemical rocket engines and basic power systems. They can't see our real fusion reactors or quantum drives. The deception has been 3 years in the making, said Dr. Helen Martinez, the diplomatic advisor. Ever since we started monitoring Zarathian communications, we knew this day would come. They follow the same pattern with every new species they meet. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park pulled up a tactical display. Their fleet is positioned exactly as our intelligence predicted. The flagship in the center, heavy cruisers forming the U. Main battle line, and smaller ships trying to surround us. They think we're trapped, Captain Morrison observed. Classic Zarathian tactics. Surround the enemy, demand surrender, then destroy them if they refuse. Meanwhile, on the Zarathian flagship Eternal Dominion, Admiral Vextar Zol was growing. Impatient. He paced back and forth on his bridge, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. How much time is left? He demanded. 15 minutes until the deadline, Admiral, replied his tactical officer. Commander Kurth Null was studying the human ships through the long-range sensors. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't identify what it was. Admiral, may I suggest? We scan them more carefully? There's something odd about their energy signatures. Odd how? Admiral Zal stopped pacing and looked at his second-in-command. I'm not sure, sir. The readings are too clean, too simple. Most primitive species have messy, inefficient power systems. These humans seem almost too basic. Admiral Zul waved his hand dismissively. You're thinking too much, Kurth. Sometimes primitive means primitive. Look at their ships. Small, boxy, ugly. They look like cargo haulers, not warships. Commander Kurth nodded, but he still felt uneasy. In his many years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about these humans didn't feel. Right back on the Liberty, the crew continued their preparations. Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh was running final checks on the real weapon systems. The Zarathians thought the human ships carried simple plasma cannons. They had no idea about the particle beam arrays, quantum torpedo launchers, and exotic matter projectors hidden beneath the fake hull plating. All weapon systems show ready, Steve reported quietly. The Zarathians are in for quite a surprise. Communications. Officer Lieutenant Susan Clark was monitoring all the alien channels. Captain, I'm picking up increased chatter from their fleet. They're getting excited about the coming battle. What are they saying? Captain Morrison asked. The usual things, sir. Betting on how quickly they can destroy us. Arguing about who gets to board our ships first, discussing what kind of slaves we'll make. Captain Morrison's jaw tightened slightly. The Zarathians had enslaved millions of beings across their empire. Today, that would change. Helen, remind me again why we chose this approach instead of showing up with an obvious battle fleet? Dr. Martinez adjusted her glasses. Because, Captain, aggressive species like the Zarathians only understand strength when it's demonstrated, not threatened. If we had arrived with obvious warships, they would have either run away or brought their entire fleet. This way, we can show them exactly what humanity is capable of while controlling the situation. Plus, added Captain Foster from the Yorktown, this is much more fun. I love the look on their faces when they realize they've been fooled. Captain Torres laughed from the defiance. Amy, you have a twisted sense of humor, but I agree. There's something satisfying about outwitting bullies. The minutes ticked by slowly. The Zarathian fleet maintained its positions, confident in their overwhelming advantage. Their weapons were charged and ready. Their boarding parties were prepared. This would be another easy victory for the Empire. On the Liberty, Captain Morrison made one final check with his crew. Everyone ready? Around the bridge, heads nodded. These men and women had trained for years for this moment. They were the best Earth had to offer, and they were about to prove it. "Jake," Captain Hayes called from the Constitution. "My sensors show the Zarathians are getting nervous. Their formation is tightening up. They want to make sure we can't escape," Captain Cooper observed from the Intrepid. Not that these fake engines could outrun them anyway. Captain Morrison looked at the chronometer. 5 minutes left on their deadline. "Final systems check, everyone. All ships report ready," came the replies from his fellow captains. "Stealth systems holding steady," Paul Anderson reported. "Weapons systems armed and ready," Steve Walsh confirmed. "Communications clear on all channels," Susan Clark added. "Diplomatic protocols prepared," Dr. Martinez said. "Tactical analysis complete," Lisa Park finished. Admiral Zool's voice suddenly boomed over the communication system. "Human ships, you have 2 minutes remaining. What is your decision?" Captain Morrison stood up from his command chair. This was the moment everything changed. "Admiral Zoll, we appreciate your generous offer, but we must respectfully decline." There was a moment of stunned silence from the Zarathian flagship. "You refuse?" Admiral Zoll's voice was filled with disbelief. "You dare refuse the Zarathian?" "Empire, we prefer to handle our affairs diplomatically," Captain Morrison replied calmly. "Perhaps we could discuss a peaceful solution that benefits both our species." The alien admiral's laughter was harsh and mocking. "Peaceful solution? You are 5 small ships facing 27 warships of the Empire. You have no weapons that can threaten us, no shields that can protect you, and no speed that can save you. What possible reason do you have to refuse?" Captain Morrison smiled, though the alien couldn't see it. "Admiral, I think you might be surprised by what humanity can do when we put our minds to it. Your time is up, human. Prepare to be destroyed." The communication channel closed with a sharp click. Captain Morrison looked around his bridge one last time. His crew was ready. His ship was ready. Humanity was ready. "All ships, this is Liberty," he said into his communicator. "Drop the disguise. Let's show them who we really are." Admiral Vextar Zool raised his hand high above his head on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Around him, his crew waited for the order to attack. The human ships floated helplessly in space, completely surrounded by Zarathian warships. "All ships, prepare to fire," the Admiral commanded. "Target their engines first. I want them disabled, not destroyed. We can learn more from intact ships." Commander Kurth Newell felt his uneasiness growing stronger. Something was wrong. The humans were too calm, too confident. But it was too late to voice his concerns now. "Fire!" Admiral Zool brought his hand down sharply. 20-7 Zarathian warships opened fire at once. Plasma beams and quantum torpedoes streaked through space toward the 5 human vessels. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small fleet of regular warships. The aliens expected to see the human ships explode, or at least lose power. Immediately, instead, something impossible happened. The moment the Zarathian weapons fired, the 5 human ships changed completely. Epoxy, ugly hulls flickered and disappeared like mirages. In their place appeared sleek, angular warships with smooth metal surfaces that seemed to absorb light. The ships were larger than they had appeared, and their hulls bristled with weapon ports and sensor arrays. "What in the void? Commander Kurth whispered, staring at his tactical display in shock. The incoming Zarathian weapons struck the human ships and simply vanished. Point defense systems had activated so quickly that the alien sensors could barely track them. Hundreds of small energy beams reached out from the human vessels, intercepting every plasma bolt and quantum torpedo with perfect accuracy. On the Liberty, Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh worked calmly at his weapons console. "All incoming fire neutralized. Captain, point defense grid is operating at 98% efficiency. Excellent work, Steve, Captain Morrison replied. He turned to his communications officer. Susan, open channels to all Zarethian ships. I think it's time for a proper introduction. Captain. Morrison's face appeared on screens throughout the Zarethian fleet. He looked calm and confident, not at all like someone whose ship had just been attacked by overwhelming force. Admiral Zoll, I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Captain Morrison said politely. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force, commanding the 5th Fleet's Reconnaissance Division. On the Zarethian flagship, Admiral Zool stared at the human captain in disbelief. Defense Force? Your ships are exploration vessels. I'm afraid not, Admiral. What you saw before were holographic disguises. We've been using them to observe how your Empire treats first contact situations. The results have been quite educational. Commander. Kurth Null was frantically checking his sensor readings. Admiral, the energy signatures from their ships. They're completely different now. These readings are off the scale. Impossible, Admiral Zoll growled. No species has technology that advanced. You're bluffing, Captain Morrison smiled. I understand your skepticism, Admiral. Perhaps a small demonstration would be helpful. Constitution, if you would. The second human ship, the Constitution, rotated slowly to face 3 Zarethian cruisers. A single weapon port opened on its hull, and a thin beam of blue light shot out. The beam touched each of the 3 alien ships for just a moment. Immediately, all 3 Zarethian cruisers went dark. Their engines stopped, their weapons powered down, and their lights went out. They were completely disabled, but undamaged. What did you do to them? Admiral Zoll demanded. Captain Ben Hayes answered from the Constitution. Particle beam disruption, Admiral. We temporarily overloaded their main power systems. The crews are unharmed, and the ships can be repaired easily. We could have destroyed them instead, but we prefer not to kill unless absolutely necessary. Admiral Zoll looked around his bridge at his shocked crew. In 30 years of conquest, he had never seen weapons that could disable ships so cleanly and precisely. This is some kind of trick, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No trick, Admiral, Captain Morrison replied. Just technology you haven't encountered before. Yorktown, would you care to show them the nanic warheads? The 3rd human ship, the Yorktown, launched 5 small projectiles toward different parts of the Zarethian fleet. The projectiles moved slowly, almost casually, giving the alien ships plenty of time to shoot them down. But when the Zarethians fired at them, their weapons simply passed through the projectiles, as if they weren't their dot. Each nanite warhead reached a different Zarethian ship and exploded in a shower of tiny sparkles. The sparkles spread across the alien hulls like glitter. What are those things? Commander Kurth asked nervously. Captain Amy Foster answered from the Yorktown. Nanoscale robots, Commander. They're currently mapping your shield generators and finding the most efficient way to shut them down. Don't worry, they won't hurt your crews. As she spoke, the shields around 5 more Zarethian ships flickered and died. The nanites had found the shield generators and simply turned them off. Admiral Zool was beginning to understand that his fleet was in serious trouble. How is this possible? Our intelligence reports said humans were a primitive species. Your intelligence was deliberately fed false information, Dr. Helen Martinez said, appearing on the screen next to Captain Morrison. We've been monitoring your Empire's communications for over a century, Admiral. We know about your conquest of the Eltarians, the enslavement of the Centauri colonies, and the destruction of the vegan homeworld. You've been spying on us? Admiral Zool's voice rose in anger. We've been watching you, Captain Morrison corrected. Humanity learned long ago that knowledge is the best defense. We knew that eventually our expansion into space would bring use into contact with your empire. We wanted to be ready. Captain Ryan Cooper of the Intrepid spoke up. Admiral, if I may demonstrate our gravity manipulation technology, I promise it won't damage your ships. Before Admiral Zal could respond, the space around 5 Zarathian ships began to shimmer. The ships were pulled out of their formation by invisible forces, moving slowly but irresistibly toward the center of the human fleet. Stop this, Admiral Zal commanded. The ships are perfectly safe, Captain Cooper assured him. We're just showing you that we can move your vessels wherever we want them. The crews inside are experiencing normal gravity. They're not being harmed. The pulled ships came to a gentle stop, now positioned between the human vessels and the rest of the Zarathian fleet. Admiral Zal realized that his own ships were now acting as shields, protecting the humans from his remaining forces. This is impossible, he whispered. Captain Nina Torres of the Defiance laughed softly. You haven't seen anything yet, Admiral. Watch this. The Defiance seemed to flicker and then vanished completely from all sensors. For a moment, there was no trace of the ship anywhere. Then it reappeared directly behind the Eternal Dominion, so close that its hull almost touched the Zarathian. Flagship, temporal displacement field, Captain Torres explained cheerfully. We stepped outside normal space-time for a few seconds. Very handy for getting around enemy fleets. Admiral Zul spun around to stare at the human warship that had somehow appeared behind him. His crew was in a state of panic, unsure how to respond to weapons and technologies they had never imagined. Admiral, Captain Morrison said gently, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about the future of this region of space. Your empire has been the dominant power here for a long time, but that's about to change. Are you threatening us? Admiral Zul asked, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Not threatening, Admiral. Informing. Humanities, now a galactic power, whether we want it to be or not. The question is whether we're going to be enemies or whether we can find a way to coexist peacefully. Commander Kurth Null leaned close to his admiral and whispered urgently, Sir, recommend we consider their offer. We've lost half our fleet's combat effectiveness, and they've barely tried. If they wanted to destroy us, we'd already be dead. Admiral. Zell looked around at his disabled ships, his confused crew, and the 5 human vessels that had revealed themselves to be far more than they appeared. For the first time in his military career, he was completely outmatched. What do you want from you? He asked quietly. Captain Morrison's expression became serious. We want you to stop, Admiral. Stop the conquests, stop the slavery, stop the destruction. It's time for a new way of doing things in this part of the galaxy. And if we refuse? The 5 human captains looked at each other across their communication screens. Finally, Captain Morrison spoke. Then we'll have to be more persuasive, Admiral. And trust me, you don't want to see what happens when humanity stops being polite. Admiral Vextar Zul stared at the tactical display on his bridge. Half of his mighty fleet was disabled or out of position. The 5 human ships sat calmly in the center of his formation, completely untouchable. His pride as a Zarathian commander warred with his growing fear of these strange beings. Admiral, Commander Kurth Null said quietly, perhaps we should listen to what they have to say. Listen? Admiral Zull's voice was sharp with anger. We are the Zarathian Empire. We do not listen to demands from primitive species. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system, calm and patient. Admiral, I understand this is difficult for you. Your empire has been the strongest power in this region for generations. But times change, and you need to change with them. You dare lecture me? Admiral Zal stepped closer to the main screen. You may have strange weapons, but you are still only 5 ships. The Empire has thousands of warships across 3-star systems. Actually, Admiral, we need to discuss that, Captain Morrison replied. Susan, please show the Admiral what we've learned about his empire. Communications Officer Lieutenant Susan Clark transmitted a detailed holographic display that appeared in the center of the Zarathian bridge. Admiral Zool and his crew watched in shock as their entire empire was laid out before them in perfect detail. The display showed every Zarathian world, every military base, every shipyard, and every resource extraction facility. It included precise locations of all Imperial fleets, their ship counts, and their current missions. Even the personal quarters of high-ranking officials were marked on the map. This is impossible, Admiral Zoll whispered. Our security is absolute. No outsider could gather this information. Your security was designed to keep out species with technology similar to your own, Dr. Helen Martinez explained. Human intelligence. Gathering operates on entirely different principles. We've been monitoring your empire for over 100 years, Admiral. We know things about your government that some of your own officials don't know. Commander Karth Null studied the display with growing horror. Admiral, look at Section 7. That shows the location of the Emperor's private retreat. That information is known only to the Imperial Guard. We also know about the rebellion brewing in the Altarian system, Captain Morrison added. The one your government thinks it has contained. We've been in contact with the resistance leaders for several years now. Admiral Zool felt his world shifting beneath his feet. Everything he had believed about Zarathian superiority was crumbling. What do you want? He asked again, his voice much quieter now. We want peace, Admiral, but peace on new terms. The age of galactic empires, built on conquest and slavery, is ending. Humanity is here to make sure of that. Captain Ben Hayes of the Constitution leaned forward on his screen. Admiral, let me show you what happens to empires that refuse to change. The Constitution fired another particle beam, this one much more powerful than the first. It struck a large asteroid floating near the battlefield. The asteroid, which was roughly the size of a city, simply vanished. There was no explosion, no debris field. It was there one moment and gone the next. Complete molecular disintegration, Captain. Hayes explained matter-of-factly. We don't usually need to use that level of power, but it's available when necessary. Admiral Zool stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been. A cold fear settled in his stomach. Weapons that could erase matter itself were beyond anything in the Zarathian arsenal. The Yorktown would like to show you our defensive capabilities. Captain Amy Foster said cheerfully. Don't worry, we won't hurt anyone. The Yorktown launched dozens of small drones that spread out around the battlefield. Each drone projected a shimmering energy field that connected with the others, creating a web of light around both fleets. Quantum barrier network, Captain Foster explained. Nothing can get in or out without our permission. Not ships, not weapons, not even radio signals. We could keep your entire fleet trapped here indefinitely if we wanted to. Captain Ryan Cooper of the Intrepid spoke up next. Admiral, observe your flagship's position carefully. The massive Eternal Dominion began to rotate slowly, despite the fact that its engines were not firing. The ship's crew felt nothing unusual, but outside observers could see the enormous vessel turning like a child's toy. Gravity manipulation. On a macro scale, Captain Cooper said. We can move planets if necessary, Admiral. Moving your ships is quite simple by comparison. Stop, Admiral Zoll said weakly. I understand. You could destroy us all. We could, Captain Morrison agreed. But we don't want to. Destruction is wasteful and unnecessary. We prefer conversion. Conversion? Captain Nina Torres of the Defiance answered him. Conversion from empire to civilization, Admiral. From conquerors to citizens of a peaceful galaxy. The Defiance will now demonstrate our temporal capabilities more fully. Captain Torres continued. Watch your sensor readings carefully. The Defiance vanished again, but this time it stayed gone for several minutes. During that time, the human ship appeared briefly at various locations throughout the star system. It was seen near the system's outer planets, close to the star itself, and at several points between. We stepped outside linear time, Captain Torres explained when the ship finally reappeared in its original position. From our perspective, we spent several hours exploring your entire star system. For you, it was only a few minutes. We could have visited every world in your empire and returned before you finished this conversation. Admiral Zal sat down heavily. In his command chair, his empire's technology seemed primitive compared to what these humans possessed. How? He asked simply. How did we develop such advanced technology? Captain Morrison considered the question. Through cooperation, Admiral. While your empire was busy conquering and enslaving other species, humanity was learning from them. We made friends instead of enemies. We shared knowledge instead of stealing it. We built alliances instead of building prisons. Dr. Martinez pulled up another display. Admiral, let me show you something interesting. This is a list of the species your empire has conquered or enslaved over the past 3 centuries. Names and pictures appeared on the screen. Dozens of different alien races, all showing signs of oppression and suffering under Zarathian rule. Now, let me show you the same species today. Dr. Martinez continued. The display changed to show the same races, but they looked completely different. They were healthy, prosperous, and obviously free. Many were working together on advanced technological projects. Every species your empire has oppressed is now a member of the Galactic Cooperative, Dr. Martinez explained. They've been working with humanity to develop the technologies you've just witnessed. The weapon systems, the defensive grids, the temporal manipulation devices. All of these were created through cooperative research. Impossible, Admiral Zal said, but his voice lacked conviction. Quite possible, Admiral, Captain Morrison replied. When people work together instead of against each other, amazing things happen. Your empire could be part of this cooperation, instead of its enemy. Commander Kurth Null looked at his admiral with pleading eyes. Sir, perhaps we should consider their offer. Our current path leads only to destruction. Admiral Zal was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything he had seen and heard. His empire, which had seemed so powerful just an hour ago, was revealed to be weak and backward compared to this human-led alliance. What would happen to us? He asked finally. To our people, our worlds, our way of life? Your people would be free to live as they choose, Captain Morrison answered. Your worlds would remain yours, but without the need to exploit others. Your way of life would change, but for the better. Instead of being conquerors, you could be explorers, scientists, artists, whatever you choose to be. And if some of our people refuse to accept these changes? Captain Morrison's expression became serious. Then they'll discover that humanity can be much less pleasant when we're not being diplomatic, Admiral. We've shown you our advanced technology. What we haven't shown you is our capacity for warfare when peaceful solutions fail. Admiral Zoll looked around his bridge at his frightened crew, then at his disabled fleet, then at the 5 human ships that had revealed themselves to be far more. Then they appeared. I need to speak with my government, he said finally. Of course, Admiral, Captain Morrison replied. But I should mention that we've already been in contact with several members of your Imperial Council. Some of them are quite interested in our proposals for peaceful cooperation. Admiral Zul's eyes widened. These humans had infiltrated even the highest levels of his government. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Captain Morrison smiled. Admiral, humanity doesn't just plan for first contact. We plan for what comes after first contact, and what comes after that, And what comes after that? We think ahead. Very far ahead, added Captain Torres with a grin. For the first time in his life, Admiral Vextar Zol began to understand that his empire was not the most powerful force in the galaxy. Not anymore. Admiral Vextar Zul stood on his bridge, looking out at the 5 human ships that had changed everything. His proud fleet was scattered and disabled. His empire's secrets had been laid bare. His entire understanding of galactic power had been shattered in less than 2 hours. Admiral, Commander Kurth Null said quietly, "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Imperial capital." "Put it through," Admiral Zal said wearily. The image that appeared on his screen shocked him. High Counselor Rexani Var, second. Only to the Emperor himself, looked tired and worried. Behind him, Admiral Zal could see other council members arguing in the background. "Admiral Zal," the High Counselor said, "we have been contacted by human representatives. They claim to have demonstrated their capabilities to your fleet. Is this true?" Admiral Zul looked at his disabled ships floating helplessly in space. "It is true, High Counselor. Their technology is far beyond anything we possess. They have weapons that can disable our ships without damaging them, defenses that can stop our most powerful attacks, and intelligence networks that know more about our empire than we do." High Counselor Rexani was quiet for a moment. "The humans have offered us terms for peaceful coexistence. The Council is divided on how to respond." "What are the terms?" Admiral Zal asked. "Complete cessation of all conquest activities. Freedom for all enslaved populations. Transformation of our military from a conquest force to a defensive one. In exchange, they offer membership in something called the Galactic Cooperative and access to their advanced technologies." Admiral Zal considered this. "High Counselor, I recommend acceptance. We cannot defeat these humans in battle. Their capabilities are simply too advanced. Some council members believe we should fight," the High Counselor said. "They think humanity is bluffing about their true strength." Captain Morrison's voice cut into the conversation. "High Counselor, if I may interrupt, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the human fleet. We are not bluffing about anything." The High Counselor looked startled. "How are you intercepting our secure communications?" "The same way we've been monitoring your empire for over a century," Captain Morrison replied calmly. "Your communication security is not as secure as you believe it to be." Dr. Helen Martinez appeared on the screen next to Captain Morrison. "High Counselor, we understand that this is a difficult decision for your government. Change is never easy, especially for a civilization that has been successful using old methods. But the galaxy is evolving, and your empire must evolve with it or be left behind. What guarantee do we have that you won't simply conquer us once we've dismantled our military?" The High Counselor asked. Captain Ben Hayes answered from the Constitution. "High Counselor, if we wanted to conquer your empire, we could have done it already. We've had detailed intelligence on all your worlds and defenses for decades. Conquest was never our goal." "Then what is your goal?" Admiral Zul asked. Captain Amy Foster smiled from the Yorktown. "Peace, Admiral. Real peace, not the temporary quiet that comes from fear and oppression. We want a galaxy where different species can work together, learn from each other, and explore the universe as friends instead of enemies." High Counselor Rexani looked thoughtful. "And you believe this is possible?" Captain Ryan Cooper of the Intrepid nodded. "It's not just possible, High Counselor. It's already happening. 47 different species are already members of the Galactic Cooperative. They've been working together for over 50 years to build a better future." 47 species? Admiral Zal was amazed. "We knew of only 12 intelligent races in this region of space." Captain Nina Torres laughed from the Defiance. "Admiral, there are over 200 intelligent species in just this galaxy alone. Your empire has been operating in a very small part of a very large universe. The implications of this statement hit Admiral Zal like a physical blow. The Jarathian Empire, which he had thought controlled a significant portion of the galaxy, was actually just a minor power in a tiny corner of space. We have been limited in our perspective, Admiral Zal admitted quietly. That's not unusual, Captain Morrison said kindly. Most species go through a phase where they think they're the most important civilization in the universe. It's a natural part of development. The question is whether you're ready to grow beyond that phase. High Counselor Rexani was quiet for several minutes, clearly thinking deeply about the situation. Finally, he spoke. What would be the first step if we decided to accept your terms? Dr. Martinez pulled up a document on her screen. We've prepared something we call the Kepler Accords, named after this star system where we're meeting. It's a framework for your empire's transition from conquest to cooperation. The first step would be an immediate ceasefire on all military operations, Captain Morrison explained. No more attacks on other worlds. No more expansion activities. No more enslavement of prisoners. The second step would be the beginning of freedom processes for all enslaved populations, Dr. Martinez continued. We understand this will take time and careful planning. We're prepared to help with the logistics. The third step would be the establishment of diplomatic relations between your empire and the Galactic Cooperative, Captain Foster added. Cultural exchange, trade agreements, joint research projects. Admiral Zal found himself nodding as he listened. After seeing what humanity was capable of, the idea of joining their alliance seemed much more attractive than fighting them. High Counselor, he said, I strongly recommend that we accept these terms. Fighting humanity would be suicide for our empire, even if we gathered all our fleets from across all three systems. The High Counselor asked. Captain Torres answered that question. High Counselor, the 5 ships you see here represent a tiny fraction of the Cooperative's defensive capabilities. If you gathered every ship in your empire, you would still be vastly outnumbered and outgunned. But more importantly, Captain, Morrison added, you would be fighting alone. Every species your empire has oppressed would be fighting against you alongside humanity. Every enemy you've made would see this as their chance for revenge. Commander Kurth Null leaned close to Admiral Zal and whispered, Sir, we have made many enemies over the centuries. A war against humanity would bring all of them down on us at once. Admiral Zal nodded grimly. High Counselor, the military situation is hopeless. We must seek peace. High Counselor Rexani was quiet for another long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders and made his decision. Admiral Zal, you are authorized to begin negotiations with the human representatives. The Imperial Council accepts the principle of peaceful coexistence. Captain Narration smiled warmly. High Counselor, Admiral, that's wonderful news. Dr. Martinez will work with your representatives to draft the specific terms of the accords. One question, Captain, Admiral Zal said. Why did you reveal your true capabilities to us? You could have continued the deception and gathered even more intelligence. Captain Morrison considered the question carefully. Because, Admiral, true peace cannot be built on deception. For our alliance to work, it has to be based on honesty and mutual respect. We wanted you to understand exactly what humanity is capable of, so you could make an informed decision about our future relationship. And, Captain Torres added with a grin, because it was fun to see the look on your face when we dropped the disguise. Despite everything, Admiral Zal found himself chuckling. These humans had a sense of humor, even in the middle of diplomatic negotiations. Over the next several hours, Dr. Martinez worked with Zarathian representatives to draft the Kepler Accords. The document outlined a gradual transition process that would transform the empire from a military dictatorship to a member of the Galactic Community. As the negotiations concluded, Admiral Zoll found himself curious about something. Captain Morrison, you said this demonstration represents your most basic defensive systems. What are your more advanced capabilities like? Captain Morrison's smile became slightly mysterious. Admiral, let's just say that what you've seen today is what we show to species we want to become friends with. What we keep hidden is reserved for species that refuse to be reasonable. The galaxy is a big place, Captain Hayes added, and humanity has had a long time to prepare for all the different kinds of neighbors we might encounter. Admiral Zoll nodded thoughtfully. He was beginning to understand that humanity was far more than they appeared to be. These 5 ships had effortlessly defeated his entire fleet, but they were just the tip of a very large iceberg. Admiral, Captain Morrison said as the negotiations drew to a close, there's one more thing I want you to understand. This isn't the end of Zarathian greatness. It's the beginning of a new kind of greatness. Your people have the opportunity to become explorers, scientists, artists, builders. Instead of being remembered as conquerors, you can be remembered as creators. The universe is vast and full of wonders, Dr. Martinez added. Working together, our species can discover things that neither of us could find alone. As the Zarathian fleet began the process of repair and reorganization under the new accords, Admiral Zoll stood on his bridge and looked out at the 5 human ships. They no longer seemed threatening. Instead, they looked like what they really were, the beginning of a new era. Commander Kurth, he said to his second-in-command, prepare a message to all Zarathian fleets.